this idea that women are killing their careers by asking for flexibility and wanting to work from home, again, just feeds into this problematic narrative that all a woman needs to do is just work a little bit harder to get her piece of the proverbial pie. And instead, it makes us not question why the system is like this in the first place. Hey y'all, Janice on the mic. But I had to get this video out because it was very important to give my 2 cents, because there's a lot of misinformation that is so rampant, and I feel like it is our responsibility to put a stop to the nonsense. So what happened? There is this British businesswoman named Emma Grede. I think her last name is interesting. I learned the pronunciation from Keke Palmer's podcast, but I know her because my parents love Shark Tank, and I was like, who is this lady? Right? I thought she was Spanish. So I was like, who's the Spanish lady? But I guess she's like the co-founder of Skims. I don't really know her full story. I never really cared to learn. I just knew she's in business with Khloe Kardashian. I think she's currently the CEO of the jean company Good American. And she's also like the co-founder of Skims. So when I look at people and I'm like, why are you as a black person, as a black woman, supporting Skims? One of the excuses I hear people say on social media is that Skims is owned by a black woman. She's biracial, and that does make a difference, but that's neither here nor there, right? I don't know her origin story outside of what I read on Wikipedia, but I do side-eye anybody that goes into business with the Kardashians. So this lady, Emma Grede, goes on to Keke Palmer's podcast. I guess she has a book she's promoting. So she goes on to Keke Palmer's podcast and she basically says this.
Work from home culture is a career killer for women. And let me explain to you why. Remembering that I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women that work for me. Now, what is happening is that we talk about all of this sort of upside of Zoom culture, but none of the rigidity of it. And no one will really tell you. But careers require proximity and visibility. You want a pay rise? You want the next promotion? You want the big corner office? Guess what? You need to be there. You might not want to hear it.
So I wrote an article about my initial thoughts, because when I'm heated or when I feel a very strong emotion, I'm a writer before anything. And so I do public speaking for a regular, on the daily, and I'm a professor and all of that, but at my core, I am a writer. So I was like, let me pull up my sleeves and get to work. And I wrote this article. I'm going to leave the link in the show notes, and you'll see a link pop up right here if you want to read more, but open the article and then come back to this video. But I wanted to share my thoughts because I think her advice as an expert is so misguided. And I will say this, right? I posted about my article. So I wrote the article, I posted about it on my Instagram. If you're not following me on there, you should be following me on there. I have a lot of interesting posts. But I posted about the article, and I will say that I don't like the narrative that's being pushed for any woman, who is in a position of power or who has reached a certain level of success. There's always this sort of undertone that women slept their way to the top. We heard the same narrative with Kamala Harris, where people said she only got to where she got because she slept her way to the top. And we hear this a lot with a lot of people, right? And so I don't know the ins and outs of Emma Grede's background outside of what I've read casually on Forbes or what I've read casually on with her Wikipedia page. But I don't think that it's a productive narrative to be pushed that she's only where she is because she married rich. That's what some people were posting in my comment section on Instagram. Is like, oh, she's only successful because she married this rich white guy and this and that. I don't know her background, but I think that undermines the actual work that it took to get her to where she is. Now, we can have a conversation about the fact that she has pretty privilege. She is a gorgeous woman. She's biracial. Her mother was, I believe she said, English. So I did watch the full Keke Palmer interview, because I'm not one of those writers that like takes clips online without getting the full context. So I did watch the entire over an hour interview, and she said that her mother was English, or is English. Her father was Trinidadian, but she was raised by a Jamaican stepfather. So on her Wikipedia page, it does explain that, but I don't know how people describe her, but she's biracial. She has pretty privilege. She has light skin privilege. She has wealth privilege. According to Forbes, her net worth is like 320 or 340 million or something. So she has a lot of privileges, and we can talk about how that has helped make her journey much easier than somebody who doesn't have that level of access and that pretty privilege and thin privilege and all of that. That is an important conversation, right? If she looked a different way, I read somewhere that she like approached Kris Kardashian or Kris Jenner, and she like pitched her or something. I think that if she looked a different way, her pitch might have been turned down, right? I think that the reality of it is pretty privilege is a real thing. People gain more access because of how they look, because they're lighter skinned, because they're pretty, because they're thin, because of who they know, because of their money. And so we can have a conversation about that, but I don't think a productive line of conversation is disparaging her and saying she slept her way to the top. I might not be a fan of her based on what I've heard about her say out of her mouth, and based on her proximity to the Kardashians, who I'm not a fan of by any means, but I think that it's demeaning to all women to push this narrative that a woman only got to where she is because she slept her way there. So my issue with her statements is that in the article, I did cite the research that proximity bias is a real thing, where managers do favor people who they are in closer physical proximity with. So my qualms with what she said are mainly that I think someone of her status and someone of her stature and someone who has as much wealth and access and privilege as her should be using their voice to try to dismantle the oppressive systems that harm women in the workplace, versus telling women to play a rigged game. Telling women, instead of questioning why they were dealt this horrible hand in the first place, they should just play with the cards that they've been dealt with. And I just think that somebody with her, again, access and privilege and wealth should be trying to deconstruct and dismantle the system that harms all women, and not telling women to adopt these more masculine traits. This is the same BS that we heard from Sheryl Sandberg, who had this New York Times bestselling book called Lean In, maybe a decade or two ago. Wow, I think it was like the early 2000s. But she basically encouraged women to, like, if they want to move forward in their careers, they need to lean in, they need to adopt. I never read the book, but I'm assuming it was like, you have to adopt these more masculine traits. It's the same thing that Sophia, I think it's Amoruso, propagated, this girl boss culture where she's like, you know, girl boss, girl boss, girl boss. And it's like, it goes along with this problematic idea that all a woman needs to do is show up to work more. If she wants the corner office, right? There's this book that I read called Nice Girls Don't Get the Corner Office. And it's all of that, right? Is propaganda. I fell for it. We all fall for it. Where it's like, oh, if a woman wants to move up in corporate America, she just needs to act more like a man, right? And there's so much research and evidence. Actually, in my PhD program, we had to read this article that stuck with me. Has stuck with me. And the article was about showing emotion in the workplace. And the article assessed how men are perceived when they show emotion, and particularly anger, versus how women are perceived. And in my book, Rise and Resist, I talked about Audre Lorde and how she has this essay called The Uses of Anger, and how she encourages women to really lean into that anger, right? I thought it was really profound, because many of us are taught that anger is not a useful emotion, and that we have to kind of run from our anger and run from these emotions. But Audre Lorde encourages us to really lean into the anger and use it as you transmute that anger into action. And so I feel like offering advice without recognizing the roles that race and sexism and ableism and classism and all of these factors play into women's workplace experiences is very shallow and hollow advice, right? There is, again, true to the fact that proximity bias is a real thing. And if you're showing up, if you're in somebody's face more, they're going to favor you more than somebody who is on Zoom. However, somebody like her has enough wealth and access and privilege to instead try to do things and develop systems and structures to deconstruct this instead of offering women the advice to play a rigged game. You know, because at the end of the day, the 600,000+ Black women that lost their jobs in 2025 didn't lose their jobs because they weren't coming into the office. You know what I'm saying? So it's like Black women have never really had a reprieve. Black women's relationship with labor has always been complicated in this country. Just to give you some stats, Black women are actually the most more likely to be breadwinners of their families, right, than any other demographic, right? Black women are more likely to be the breadwinners. And so that's why 600,000 Black women losing their jobs in 2025 is so devastating to Black families and to the economy. And Black women also are more likely to or have higher labor force participation. So there's more Black women in the labor force than any other group, which is also something important that we have to keep in mind. So it's not like Black women are not showing up. It's not like women of marginalized groups are not showing up. And what's interesting, Catalyst came out with a study in early 2026 where they found that women are leaving the workforce at astronomical rates. This idea that women are killing their careers by asking for flexibility and wanting to work from home, again, just feeds into this problematic narrative that all a woman needs to do is just work a little bit harder to get her piece of the proverbial pie. And instead, it makes us not question why the system is like this in the first place. Black women have labored harder than anybody else in this country. And yet we lost over 600,000 jobs. So I think that just by that logic, if working hard was all that it took and showing up was all that it took, Black women have done that and we still lost our jobs. So I think that just proves that Emma Grede's advice is so hollow and there's no substance to it. And it's easy for somebody who, again, is rich, is wealthy, has a proximity to whiteness because she's biracial, is pretty, has a proximity to the Kardashians, has all of these things to offer this advice. Malcolm Gladwell, y'all, said the same thing. A couple years ago, I think in 2022, Malcolm Gladwell basically admonished work from home. And yet he had no issue with him working from home because he has in many interviews stated that he enjoys working from home, and yet he offered advice that he thought work from home was not a good idea for others, right? So it's like a yes for me, but not for thee type of mindset, which to me is just super problematic. It is also like how all of those like super wealthy people a couple years ago were telling millennials and Gen Z to buy less avocado toast instead of like realizing that the system, there's no reason that coffee should cost $6 and avocado toast should cost. These astronomical prices are the issue and not people doing what they have to do to get a little bit of pleasure or a little bit of joy. If somebody wants to spend $6 on an avocado toast, that's not breaking the bank when the system itself is broken. And so again, I think that and I got some really interesting comments on my Instagram. I'm going to post some of the comments here. And, you know, I just think that the comments are really funny because I think a lot of Black people, the same thing happens when you like critique someone like Jay-Z, right? People come to his defense. And I think people think that like they want to defend people like Jay-Z and like Emma Grede because they feel like one day they may reach that level and they don't want to be critiqued. And Emma Grede and Jay-Z are not the same, because Emma Grede is not, according to Forbes, a billionaire. Jay-Z is. So to me, they're in a little bit of a different category. But I do think that it's funny that how many people defend these folks' actions because they think they can get some sort of crumbs of what they have. You know, if wealth was all that it took to ascend out of oppression, then Oprah would not have been racially profiled when she went to Europe. Henry Louis Gates would not have been racially profiled when he got locked out of his home. A$AP Rocky would not have been racially profiled in Sweden when he got arrested. This is the same A$AP Rocky that said he's like, I don't know anything about Black Lives Matter. I live in Soho. You know what I'm saying? So like, wealth does not, one thing that I wrote, I wrote this line and I was like, I did that in the article. You cannot lean your way out of, or girl boss your way out of oppression. It's just, that's just the fact of the matter, no matter how hard you work. And I think that's why Emma's comments were so infuriating, because there was no analysis to the people that do work hard, the women that put in all the work and still get the crappy outcomes and don't get, don't see the fruits of their labor. And so if working hard was all that it took to succeed, there would be, Black women would be at the top of the game, because we work so hard. And so I just think we got to stop listening to celebrities. Malcolm X already told us, celebrities, I don't listen to any of them. I follow very few of them. And I wish more people were less people were defending billionaires and multimillionaires, and there was more class solidarity. I feel like there is less class solidarity because so many people think that they will ascend to that level, and they don't want to critique people who are at that level because they fear that maybe one day they'll get to meet someone like Emma or Jay-Z, so they don't want to be seen as like critiquing them, or they feel like, well, when I'm at that level, I don't want people critiquing me. I don't give... For me, I know that Emma Grede's statements are not bringing any of us closer to liberation. Playing the game, and playing the game well, is what Black people have always done. Like, look at the average Black person in a position of power. We are amazing. We are excellent. Look at someone like Ketanji Brown Jackson. When you stack her against the other Supreme Court justices, she is like top of the class, right? Did that stop her from experiencing racism or sexism or harm or this or that? No, it doesn't. And so if all it took was her working hard to not experience, right? And I don't want to put words in Emma Grede's mouth. She never said, if you work hard, you won't experience these things. But I think it's irresponsible to say work from home is a career killer for women without acknowledging the reasons why more women want to work from home in the first place, and how the system was set against women, and how if you've employed, according to her words, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of women, then why don't you put yourself in a position where you can create policies and practices and systems that address this broken system? You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think someone in her position of power and privilege should be doing more to address the broken system versus wagging her finger at women who do what they have to do to survive within the broken system. I think the main takeaway of this video that I hope that you walk away with is that celebrities are not people we should be following or listening to. I don't even care if you were successful. I don't want to hear, because I feel like most advice is very hollow. What Beyonce did or Rihanna did to be successful is not going to apply to the average person, right? Because each of us have a different journey. And Beyonce had a lot of things in her favor. Her parents were upper middle class. Rihanna had access. Rihanna has pretty privilege. Rihanna had, like, there's all of these things that if you don't have these things, your journey is not going to be the same. And it's not taking away from their talent to acknowledge that there were privileges that made their journey easier and that made their pathway easier. And so I think that I'm just glad that, that we're seeing people bucking against the system. We've been seeing all of these warehouses, employees setting warehouses on fire, and I'm not condoning arson, but I think people are sick of the status quo, and people are tired of these oppressive systems, and people are doing what they have to do to make their voices heard, and I support that. And I'm glad so many people called out Emma Grede's statements. You know, I did have the people here and there in my comments like defending her, but again, there's always going to be those people that as the saying goes, Harriet would have, you know, somebody said I'm not arguing with people that Harriet would have shot, and I agree with that. So that's a video. I just wanted to share my thoughts. Let me know what you think. If you've seen the podcast, that was actually my first time watching Keke Palmer's podcast. I actually really like her as an interview, even though she's not a journalist, and I don't think she interviews men well, especially like she's had abusers on her show and she doesn't really like do these deep dive questions. But again, she's not a journalist. I liked how she interviewed. I think she's a good interviewer in some context. But, you know, of course, with celebrities, interviewing people is like if you're friends with someone or you have a relationship with someone, you're not going to go in the way you should, which is why we definitely need journalists and not celebrities go moonlighting as a journalist. But those are my thoughts. Let me know what y'all think, and I will check y'all out in the next video.